Hello, I am Ella, and this is my movie commentary video for my Philosophy of Wellbeing QLC. I'm going to be reviewing Little Miss Sunshine and pointing out themes that are shared with those we have been studying in this learning community. I'll go over the film by investigating each of the main characters and the attributes of happiness, well-being, and the lack thereof that they portray, and also adding some of the resources that we have studied, almost as advice or signs of growth from those characters. So first, what is Little Miss Sunshine? It's a dramedy that follows a dysfunctional family as they embarked on a cross-country road trip to enter Olive Hoover, the main character, in the Little Miss Sunshine beauty pageant, encountering every imaginable bump on the road. The family, which consists of a mother, father, brother, and grandfather, with the recent addition of an uncle newly released from inpatient hospital care, is forced to face every challenge they meet together because, quite frankly, they have nowhere else to go. As I mentioned earlier, each character represents different themes that we've been studying over the semester. So I'll begin my character analysis with Frank, Olive's uncle and heartbroken genius who has just been discharged from the hospital after making an attempt on his life. He is sent to live with his sister while in recovery, Olive's mom, and embodies a quote from a chapter of Gordon Livingston's Too Soon Old, Too Late Smart, in the chapter Happiness is the Ultimate Risk. He says, "People in despair are naturally intensely self-absorbed. Suicide is the ultimate expression of this preoccupation with self." So for Frank, he enters the scene completely depressed, very discouraged at his life situation, and as the movie progresses, growth for him meant looking outside of himself and taking a glimpse into Olive and into Dwayne's world. He saw that there was so much more to life than his own despair, and he was able to move on with his life and actually see growth and happiness. For Richard, he is the dad in this movie, and I'm going to read from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations because Richard is a bit of a self-absorbed person who is in denial of every wrong thing that's going on in his life. So for him, I would read book 8, number 5, and it's 2 steps that Marcus Aurelius is giving to himself, but can be applied to Richard in this case. The first step: don't be anxious. Nature controls it all, and before long, you'll be no one, nowhere, like Hadrian, like Augustus. So this first bit of advice is relating to the need for humility, especially in Richard's life here. He's very obsessed with his 9 steps to becoming a winner as a self-proclaimed self-help guru, and he needs to take a look inside. And the second step that he says here in book 8 is concentrate on what you have to do. Fix your eyes on it. Remind yourself that your task is to be a good human being, not to be a winner. Remind yourself what nature demands of people, then do it without hesitation and speak the truth as you see it, but with kindness, with humility, without hypocrisy. So growth for Richard means looking inside himself, but then also reassessing what his goals are and learning to love his family as they are. And we saw that as the movie progressed. And the mom here is Cheryl, and she really embodies realism by the end of the movie, but at the beginning she is drowning in pessimism. She feels like she has to be the one that is the truth teller in the family. She probably would say about herself that she's the one that keeps the family afloat, and it's a very good thing, but for her, her growth as a character looked like going from pessimism to realism. So for her, I would read book 8, number 36. The beginning of it says, "Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Don't try to picture everything bad that could possibly happen. Stick with the situation and ask, why is this so unbearable? Why can't I endure it?" So for her, she doesn't need to be unrealistic and optimistic and think about all the things that probably aren't going to happen that are good. She can look at life as it really is, at her brother being depressed, at her husband being a little bit crazy at the beginning, at her daughter and son each having their own things going on, but also look at it with love for her family and see it as it is, approach the situation instead of just relying on pessimism. The next person is Edwin, the grandfather, and his role, especially in one particular scene, is that of reframing. And it made me think of a quote from a book that we read called You Are Here by Nat Han. It says, "If you look deeply at a flower, at its freshness and its beauty, you will see that there is also compost in it, made of garbage. The gardener had the skill to transform this garbage into compost, and with this compost, he made a flower grow." I think back to one scene where Edwin and Olive are about to go to sleep before continuing on their journey, and Olive begins to get overwhelmed by the pressure that her father puts on her to not be a loser. She starts crying, the weight of his expectations clouding her usually positive demeanor. But here Edwin steps in and helps her see a different perspective when he says, "Losers are people who are so afraid of not winning that they don't even try." And he reframes something that could be taken really poorly and encourages her, helping her see the best in her dad, even in something that he personally needed growth in. The next character is Dwayne, who is Olive's angry brother, who has taken a vow of silence until he achieves his goal of becoming a pilot. And he embodies Paul's Bloom idea of chosen suffering. He takes away his own voice in order to remember his goal and prolong his anger at his family. So in the sweet spot, Bloom quotes C.S. Lewis, bringing light to one of the possible motives behind this chosen suffering. He says, "Everyone knows that fasting, and in this case it's the fasting from speech, is a different experience from missing your dinner by accident or through poverty. Fasting asserts the will against the appetite, the reward being self-mastery and the danger pride." So here, Dwayne maintains control of his life by staying silent and cutting himself off from his family. However, when he learns that his color blindness prevents him from becoming a pilot, he sinks even further to this anger. It's not until Dwayne is talking to Frank about how he wishes he could skip out on high school, and Frank encourages him by speaking Dwayne's language. He says, "Think of the suffering you're going to miss. I mean, high school, those are your prime suffering years. You don't get better suffering than that." So for Dwayne, growth looked like listening to Frank and also acknowledging when his goal was unachievable and learning to live with that and create new goals in his life. And the final character, the main character, is Olive, and she really embodies this idea of maturing out of being sheltered. She is faced with setbacks of all kinds, many of which are inescapably straight from her immediate family. But these are the things that ultimately strengthen her confidence and her self-esteem. In many instances, one of which being Richard telling her what happens when you eat too much sugar, and another being her whole family allowing her to go out on the Little Miss Sunshine stage, Olive's family brutally unshelters her from the cruelty and brutality of the world. And this relates to Daniel Habron's thoughts from Happiness, A Very Short Introduction. In it, he states, "Security is good for happiness, but more is not always better. Too much security can make us complacent, lazy, soft, and weak, stunting personal development. A coddled, risk-free childhood can be a recipe for an unhappy adult, unwilling or unable to persevere through hard times and unequipped to handle the uncertainties, dangers, frustrations, and setbacks of everyday life." So after reading this, we can see that in a very unorthodox way, Olive's family learns how to care well for her and for each other. It may not be the healthiest or most effective way of doing it, but it reminds me that none of us have it figured out. And in the end, the Hoover family becomes an extremely human example of what the path to realistic happiness could look like. Thank you.